Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Kaur-Khan, founder of Productable, and welcome. Thank you so much for coming to yet another Invisible Enemies of Innovation Quick Talk. So some of you might not be familiar with us. Productable is the cyber startup behind Project Holodeck, and we started this webinar series as a way to discuss some of the innovation roadblocks that we've seen in our work with the Air Force. So we've been working hand in hand with the Office of the Vice Chief of Staff and SAFMG for the last year to bring the right people, processes, and funding together so that we can drive innovation at scale and accelerate change. One of the ways we're working with the Air Force is by driving innovation leadership to work to define clear opportunities. And we look to General Brown's Accelerate, Change, or Lose strategic approach to help guide us on that. So based on all of that, I'm really excited to bring today's speaker. He's an expert in aligning innovation efforts and was brought to the Productable team to bring an industry mindset to our work with the Air Force. So with all of that in mind, I'd love to introduce you to Tyler Steinke, one of Productable's in-house innovation experts. And Tyler comes to us from leading corporate innovation for a Silicon Valley-based consulting practice. He's advised dozens of global corporations on innovation strategy, startup engagement, corporate venture capital, and he has worked with some of Fortune 500's biggest names in innovation like Epson, IBM, AT&T, Fujitsu, and Emirates Airlines. So Tyler's here to talk to you about one of the most common enemies of innovations when innovators get told to just go innovate something. So with that, I'll hand the floor over to Tyler.
Thanks so much, Rachel. It's a pleasure to be here today and excited to talk more about Just Go Innovate. Just go innovate. It's not that hard. We had a LinkedIn thread going, and I actually see someone on the thread who made this comment. It's not that hard. Just go innovate. Well, telling someone to just go innovate is like telling a baby to just go run a lap, right? Or even just go run a marathon. There are a couple of things to break that down, right, in this metaphor. Well, the baby doesn't even have shoes on, right? Like that's gonna hurt. Similarly, we're telling an innovator to go innovate and they don't have the right tools. I'm sure the baby has no idea which path to even take here, right? So for an innovator, what direction do I go in? Which process or which lane do I take? I'm sure the baby has no idea what that is, right? And honestly, why does the baby need to go run a lap, run a marathon? And for a lot of innovators, there's no why, right? And also, there isn't an understanding of what happens when they cross the finish line. So is it really not that hard to innovate? Well, I'd beg to differ. To expand upon the metaphor, I want to say that we just don't go tell an accountant to go account, right? We train them. We provide them with general acceptable accounting principles, GAAP, and then we give them tools when you're thinking about how to manage finances. We don't tell a designer to just go to design, right? We give them a brief. We tell them what we actually need to see, and we give them tools like Adobe or Figma. We don't tell procurement to just go procure, right? They have funding, budgets, and intended outcome. But that's not the case for innovation right now. We're told to just go innovate. Well, innovation is seen as this silver bullet, right? Just go innovate. 21st century silver bullet. And it means something different to so many different people, right? This could go a variety of directions and actually create a lot of mayhem. To some people, just go innovate means technology, right? We need blockchain, AI, 3D printing, more R&D. To others, it means innovation activities. So these could be your hackathons, ideathons, startup weekends. Let's go be a startup. Could be Silicon Valley mindsets or mimicry, right? We're doing tours. Maybe we're looking at nap pods, ping pong tables, kombucha on tap, or even higher level, right? Go innovate, organization, digital transformation, culture. Now, actually, all of these are good innovation in their own right. Maybe not nap pods, we can let that one go. But saying just go innovate actually unleashes a Pandora's box with very little direction to take. Now, if we follow this out, right, I like to think about what's the second order and the third order effect of saying just go innovate. It actually leaves behind a trail of confusion and disappointment. So we follow this bullet, we're seeing things like misalignment, discouraged innovators, unfulfilled expectations. Well, there weren't any set. Smoke and mirrors, no accountability, and wasteful spend. That doesn't sound too great for me. And this is the state of a lot of innovation programs now that we see, and we want to change that. So just go innovate. I like to think about where does this actually come from and think about the motivations that people are saying behind the scenes, right? In my mind, when we say just go innovate, it comes from two areas. One is I don't care, right? Innovation is an afterthought. Lacking alignment, maybe we're unwilling to invest in it. There's no resources or funding. There's no time to experiment. Just go innovate. The other comes from an I don't know. And I like this one a lot because it's people want to innovate, they just don't know how, right? Where to start? How does this connect to the big picture? And what does innovation even mean? There's so many words and terminologies out there. Now, we were going to focus today on I don't know. And if you fall in the I don't care category and know people in that, that's a totally different topic. It's really hard to create motivation from nothing. But today we're going to focus on the people when we say just go innovate, they don't know. So it's probably a good place to start off with what is innovation? Well, a simple definition here put together is innovation is the process of going from idea to intentional impact. A couple key words here. We have process, right? So some repeatability to it. Idea, so the inception, the creation of something new. And then intentional impact, right? Building on what Adam had said in the last webinar, taking it a step further from outcomes and really thinking about the impact, but it isn't by happenstance, right? We're intentionally generating an impact for the organization, for the business, for the Air Force, whatever it may be. So let's take this a step further. What is impact intention? So impact intention is the strategic result we're looking for. Now, it's funny because more often than not, innovation right now is seen as an end in itself rather than a mechanism for achieving a specific form of change. So how can we tie that even closer? I mean, a simple way is saying what problem are we solving or what's the goal? But really thinking about the strategic result or impact that we're looking for from doing this innovation activity. In order to then quantify it, we need to set a metric, right? How will we know when we are successful with this innovation? And then third, creating it time bound. When are we looking to achieve this impact, right? Having a strategic goal in mind for that outcome. An example of this I saw in industry was a project I was working on prior to Productable. And it was our goal is to generate the next $1 billion business by 2025, right? It's very broad, very ambiguous, but also creates the swim lane and the North Star, if you will, for innovators to innovate in. A couple of things here to break down. We have the date, so by 2025. We have the objective, which is creating new business, and we have the metric, which is $1 billion. So although this is quite broad, I actually really like this general objective and intentional impact because of these different reasons here. The next is actually a clear process. So we've set that North Star. We have our impact identified. So how are we going to get there? What direction do I take? Well, innovation isn't linear, right? It has a lot of different processes and there are a lot of different methodologies. One size doesn't fit all. But what we want to do is start to establish some swim lanes, some guardrails, some best practices in order for innovators to innovate within. So we're thinking about what's the best methodology for the task at hand, and maybe even providing learning guides for innovators. We see that successful innovation follows a process, and we see this in the Air Force, and we see this in industry. Very similar, thinking about value proposition, thinking about testing, how we actually then validate, pilot, and scale that concept. Same thing here, a little bit more visual, where each time, then we're going to be adding more resources and a different layer of testing for the process. Now, some bonus material that with my last couple of minutes here, I want to mention, if you have a impact goal and you have the process to get there, you need motivated people. We can talk all day about this and happy to talk afterwards, but thinking about rewards, financial and non-financial, tying this into performance reviews, and even providing autonomy to innovate. Second bonus is resources, and you need time, money, and executive support to see this come to fruition. All in all, to sum it up, there are 4 key areas that are needed to just innovate. And we're thinking about impact intention, a clear process, motivated people, and then project resources. Now, at Productable, we're bringing that all together, and it's really fun to work with amazing innovators, both in leadership and at the front lines, in order to bring innovation to market. And what we're seeing here is that the same processes for managing one product don't necessarily scale on a manual basis. We need a standard of innovation for aligning people, processes, and portfolios to achieve outcomes. So that's what we're doing here at Productable. I hope from today and from this little bit of a quick talk here that we're actually able to go from just go innovate to let's start innovating. Any questions?
Tyler, thank you so much for that talk. It was wonderful. I really enjoyed your silver excuse me, your silver bullet analogy there. It was so on point from so many of the different conversations that I've had in industry. So pulling up from the chat and looking at some of the questions we're getting in, I think it's kind of trickling in, but one of the first ones that I'm seeing come through is, so what happens if you're an innovator and you're asked to go innovate? What do you actually go do about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it really depends on the relationship that you have with the superior who's asking you to innovate, right? It's a hard spot to be in as an innovator and just go innovate. I would first start with, okay, what's the goal, right? What are we hoping to achieve here? Because we need a little bit more direction than just go innovate. So thinking about that impact objective. From there, as an innovator, we want to make sure that we're successful. And I'm going to go back a couple slides when we're thinking about resources. So if we're looking to innovate, will I have the time to work on this, to experiment, and setting some boundaries, or actually setting some understanding of where this fits in with other priorities and carving out that space to actually innovate. As an innovator, if we need to test, we can do a lot of tests, MVPs without money, but it may be good to know if there are resources or tools available in order to see this move forward.
So what if I'm not given those resources?
If you're not given those resources, it does signal some different things, right? If we're not given those resources, is this actually a priority, right? If there's no money for us to innovate, is this actually a priority for the organization? If you still want to innovate and you're motivated and you want to achieve those objectives, there are a lot of different opportunities to use free software online to do demos, to do trials. There are some methodologies for really low fidelity prototyping that we can recommend and suggest that we have access to, that we share with our innovators. And then actually thinking about how we can wireframe some cheap and easy results.
I love those answers. Just starting some early proof points and seeing what you can get done.
And building on that, Rachel, right? Like, make the case for the budget, right? You need to have a little bit of that validation. Sometimes people are a little bit scared to invest if they don't know what they're going to get out of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I love what you're talking about, and all those different pieces coming together. Seeing some more questions coming through. I'm picking and choosing here a little bit. And we have one that says, what recommendations do you have on how much information and what format to communicate to leadership? Said it another way, how do we reduce the burden of updates on briefs that pull you away from innovating? That's such a great question. Sorry, I know this is your question, but I just can't tell you how many times I've felt the pain of innovation leaders figuring out, do I spend my time telling leadership what we're doing or actually help my innovators? And it's like you never have enough time for both. So this is such a great question.
Definitely. Well, the cheesy plug answer is use a system like Productable, right? But when we're thinking about how to balance updating leadership on progress to making that case, and then also thinking about actual time to innovate, right? So this goes back to process. So when we're thinking about how do we actually create a process for success, standardizing, if you will, what that update is, and then working towards those clear goals and intentions. So often in that case, we're thinking about what will we do, go execute upon that, and then share those learnings and provide that in a regular update. So your own updates are actually the pre-work that you're doing is a strategy session and makes you reflect and think about that innovation in order to then go execute upon it. So there's actually nothing lost with the update. What it's doing is helping you collect your own thoughts. So I'm happy to expand upon that if that was a little bit of a high level concept.
I love that, Tyler. Well, maybe just to take back to the concept you were saying at the beginning, where accountants and all these other groups have their own process to be able to innovate. You would never tell an accountant to go come up with all of the the data from the organization without giving them an Excel sheet to fill out all of the different parts of the org and all of their budgets and spend. You would give them all of that data and then they would collect it back and share it back. Innovation often feels like they're not given all of those Excel sheets and tools and told to just collect some data. So it makes the job really, really hard to succeed if I'm understanding what you're saying, essentially.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Being able to have that standardization if you're looking to innovate in organizations is really helpful. And then also making sure that what's included in that standardization is helpful for both parties. Right? Is there unnecessary information or is the barrier too high to entry when it comes to actually filling out that information? Because a lot of times we don't know yet, right? Like I wouldn't like going back a little bit in the presentation to an innovator, like tell me the expected go to market strategy when we're still trying to figure out the align on value. So making sure that those updates and that the request for information is appropriate at the right phase.
Love that. And I'm seeing some more comments coming in around if we can institutionalize this from the top and get stakeholders to use it, it can make such an ease on briefing from across the whole organization. So really standardizing the same way you would in accounting, the same way you would in any other type of the organization. So really, really enjoyed all of this, Tyler. I know we're basically at time. This is meant to be a really quick chat, but I feel like we could talk all day on this. Really great thoughts, and we really appreciate all of this. So thank you so much.
Thanks for the time and thanks for tuning in, everyone. Take care.